thought it would feel strange having Sophie back in our Savannah home, that the distance of nearly a year would show. But the moment she walked in, it was as if no time had passed, as if she still belonged in our Gothic revival house. When I saw how Daniel looked at her, I realized something was about to shift, and none of us were ready for what that meant. The first thing Sophie did was kick off her shoes in the hallway, the polished wooden floors catching the soft glow of Savannah's streetlights through the arched windows. It took all of 5 minutes for her to reclaim the space, dropping her bag on the couch and pulling me into a hug that smelled of sunscreen and old perfume. She held my face and said, "God, Claire, I've missed you." We opened wine before unpacking her things. Daniel joined us, his presence a mix of politeness and curiosity. I could tell he remembered Sophie's stories, her chaos, her charm. I don't think he ever pictured her in our home, though, especially not like this. She made herself at home quickly, curling her feet under her at dinner, teasing Daniel about how boring we'd become in Savannah. I laughed, but I watched, because every time she made him smile, something twisted inside me tight, unfamiliar. After we ate, Sophie grabbed the sponge before I could. "You cooked, Claire," she said. Daniel poured wine. "That means I clean." She was always like this, confident, decisive, almost too comfortable in other people's lives. While scrubbing a plate, she looked over her shoulder at him and said, "Does Claire ever let you rest, Daniel? Or do you do all the work around here?" I froze. He chuckled awkwardly. I smiled too wide, but I felt it, that shift, that edge in her voice that didn't sound like teasing anymore. Later, I handed Sophie one of my robes after her shower, a soft one I kept for quiet Savannah weekends. She slipped it on right there in the doorway, not even turning away. When she walked into the living room, the robe hanging loose, her damp hair catching the lamplight, I caught Daniel watching. He didn't say a thing, neither did I. We sat together a little longer, the wine making everything soft, blurry, quiet. Then Sophie asked, casual as anything, "Want to be bad and crash in the same bed like old times?" I laughed. So did Daniel. And I said, yes. The lights were off, but none of us were sleeping. I lay on my side, facing the window, eyes wide open. Savannah's night sounds faint beyond the glass. Behind me, I could hear their breathing, Daniel slower than usual. Sophie's too even to be real. We were all just lying there, pretending we weren't waiting for something to happen. The bed felt smaller than ever, every inch of space between us charged, not loudly, but quietly, like static before a storm. My skin prickled under the sheets. None of us had spoken since the lights went out, but I could feel the shift not in the air, not in the room, but in Daniel. A small adjustment, barely a movement, but enough to let me know he wasn't just lying still. Then the blanket rustled, soft, careful, followed by a silence so sharp it felt deliberate. That's when I knew Sophie had reached for him. Daniel didn't pull away. He didn't speak. He just let out a breath I hadn't heard from him before. I didn't turn around. I didn't need to. Sophie was touching him, and he was letting her. What surprised me most wasn't that it was happening, it was how easy it felt to let it happen. I stayed on my side, facing the wall, eyes open, The air behind me felt heavier, warmer. I could hear Sophie, soft and steady, still in control, knowing exactly what she was doing. Daniel was between us, but I could feel him turning toward me, not with his body, but with his attention. His breathing shifted, more focused, more deliberate, like he was trying to hold on to something just out of reach. Then I felt it, his hand searching for mine beneath the blanket. When his fingers found me, I froze for a second, but I didn't pull away. He didn't grip. He just held on. Loose. Quiet. Present. I kept my eyes open, staring into the dark, letting the moments stretch around us. He was still facing Sophie, but he wasn't letting go of me. Something clicked inside me. Not a snap, not a break, just a shift. I wasn't outside this anymore. I wasn't a witness. I was part of it. Daniel wasn't asking for permission. He was holding on to connection, to me, and whatever came next. He wanted me there for it. I didn't turn toward them, but I didn't turn away either. I stayed still, eyes open in the dark. The room went quiet again, but the quiet wasn't empty. It was full, heavy, like we were all waiting for permission. No one was willing to ask for. Then the blanket shifted again. More deliberate this time. Daniel was still lying on his back, and Sophie was moving closer. Slow, steady, without a word. I could feel her adjusting under the covers, could sense her knee shifting slightly beneath the blanket, the quiet way her arm rested near him. I didn't need to see it to know something had changed. She was taking her time, not rushing, just getting comfortable. She moved with ease, like she'd done this before, like she felt completely at home in our savannah bedroom. I heard a faint breath from Daniel, then a quiet one from Sophie. My pulse picked up, and I wasn't sure if it was nerves or anticipation, maybe both. The bed creaked just once, just enough to let me know Sophie had shifted again, rising slightly, adjusting her posture like she was settling in beside him. Her movement was light, easy, her pace almost still, like she wanted every moment to last. Daniel's breathing changed slower, quieter. I could tell he was focused, listening, maybe not wanting to interrupt whatever this was, but Sophie wasn't holding back. Every adjustment from her seemed deliberate, a small movement here, a quiet whisper there, something about how she'd missed being around him, how familiar it felt, how natural he made it. I didn't move, but I was no longer just watching. My hand, still under the blanket, found the space between Daniel's arm and his side, not grabbing, just resting there. His fingers found mine a second later. He didn't squeeze. He didn't pull. He just held on, like he wanted to know I was still with him. I listened to them, felt the energy in the room shift, the way Sophie's breath grew softer, the way Daniel's attention seemed to waver. Then, all at once, everyone seemed to settle. No words, no movement, just a quiet pause shared between the three of us. I closed my eyes, not out of shame, but because I knew what came next. And I was ready for it. I didn't think. I just turned. The air felt dense, like the room hadn't breathed in a while. Sophie was still near Daniel, calm and quiet in the faint light filtering through the savannah night. Her presence soft but unmistakably there. He stayed still beside her, as though the moment might break if anyone moved too quickly. I didn't hesitate, no awkwardness, no uncertainty. I moved slowly across the sheet until I was beside them, until I was included. The blanket shifted lightly, but no one reacted. It didn't feel strange. It felt expected. I reached toward Sophie first. My hand grazed hers, and she turned slightly, just enough to let me know she'd felt it. Her eyes met mine for a moment, clear, unguarded, like she understood everything I couldn't say. Then I reached for Daniel, my hand resting gently over his chest. He turned his head, and our lips met briefly. It wasn't urgent, wasn't heavy, it was steady, familiar, like we'd shared this space 1,000 times before, only now with something unspoken between us. His hand lifted to the back of my neck, not to lead, but to keep me close. Sophie adjusted beside him again, her movement quiet and smooth. She wasn't retreating, she was making space. I moved closer. We didn't speak, didn't explain, didn't need to. Our positions settled naturally, nothing rehearsed. But everything made sense. I found myself lying between them, steady and still, surrounded by warmth and awareness. One of Sophie's hands found mine again, her grip firmer this time, certain. The room felt smaller, softer, the kind of quiet that doesn't ask for silence, it just holds it. There was no rhythm, no urgency, just closeness. Sophie adjusted again. Daniel shifted slightly. I stayed still. I could feel something building in me, not sharp or sudden, but steady. Not from touch or movement, but from being part of it. From knowing I wasn't on the outside anymore. From feeling chosen. That stirred something in me I hadn't expected. I turned my face into the space between them. Let my hand brush against Sophie's. Let my other arm settle across Daniel. I didn't know where I ended and they began. And for once, I didn't need to. The room quieted even further. A stillness that carried weight without tension. In that pause, gentle, open, complete. I felt something shift inside me. It wasn't loud, wasn't dramatic. It just settled in, and I let it. In that quiet moment, surrounded by both of them in our savannah home. I felt seen. I felt steady. And for the first time in a very long time, I felt whole. The morning after, Savannah's dawn light slipped through the arched windows, casting long shadows across the hardwood floors. Sophie and Daniel were still asleep, their breathing soft in the quiet room. I slipped out of bed, my bare feet silent on the polished wood, and made coffee in the kitchen, the familiar ritual grounding me. The events of the night felt like a dream, but the warmth in my chest was real. Claire, had crossed a threshold I hadn't known existed, and there was no going back. Sophie left that afternoon, her departure as abrupt as her arrival. She hugged me tightly at the door, her eyes holding mine. "Don't let this fade. Claire," she whispered. "You're more than you think." Then she was gone, her laughter echoing down the cobblestone street. Daniel and I didn't speak of it immediately. We moved through our routine's work. Dinners, walks through Savannah's Forsyth Park, but the air between us had changed. His touches lingered, his glances held weight, and I felt a new closeness, as if that night had stripped away a layer of distance we hadn't acknowledged. Days turned to weeks, and the memory of Sophie lingered like a scent in our home. I found myself wondering if she'd return, if that night was a singular moment or the start of something new. Daniel broke the silence one evening as we sat on the porch, the humid Savannah air thick around us. "Claire," he said, his voice low. "What did that night mean to you?" I sipped my wine, the question settling heavily. It meant I wasn't invisible. I said finally, it meant I could still feel everything. With you. With her. What about you? He looked out at the oak-lined street, his jaw tight. It was like waking up. I didn't know I needed it until it happened. But it's you I need. Claire. Always you. His words steadied me. But they also raised questions. Was Sophie a catalyst? Or was she part of us now I didn't have answers? But I wasn't afraid to face the uncertainty. That night had taught me I could embrace the unknown without losing myself. Months later, Sophie texted, "In Savannah next week. Can I stay?" My heart raced as I showed Daniel the message. He met my gaze, a slow smile spreading. "What do you think?" "Claire," I nodded. "Let her come." Sophie's return was different, less chaotic, more intentional. She arrived with a bottle of bourbon, a nod to Savannah's love for strong spirits. And we sat in the living room, the lamplight warm on our faces. The conversation flowed easily, but the undercurrent was unmistakable. Sophie's glances were bolder, Daniel's responses more direct, and I felt a thrill at being part of their dance. When she suggested sharing the bed again, there was no laughter, only a quiet agreement. That night was less tentative, more assured. Sophie's touch was confident, Daniel's hands steady, and I moved with them. No longer a bystander, but a partner. We found a rhythm, not just physical, but emotional. A shared understanding that this was ours to define. Afterward, we lay together, the Savannah night wrapping us in its quiet. And I felt a peace I hadn't known I was seeking. Sophie's visits became a pattern, not frequent, but regular enough to keep the connection alive. She'd arrive with stories of her travels, her energy filling our home, and we'd slip into that shared space, each time learning more about ourselves. Daniel and I grew closer, our marriage strengthened by the honesty that night had forced us to confront. We talked openly about boundaries, desires, what Sophie meant to us. She wasn't a threat, she was a mirror, reflecting parts of us we'd forgotten. Yet, doubts crept in during quiet moments. Savannah's historic district was a place of tradition, and I wondered what our neighbours would think if they knew. Would they see me, Claire, as reckless, or would they understand this was about reclaiming life? I pushed the thoughts aside, focusing on the present. This was my home, my marriage, my choice. One evening, as we walked through Savannah's squares, Daniel took my hand. "Claire," he said, "do you ever regret it? Letting Sophie in?" I stopped, the moss-draped oaks overhead casting shadows. "No," I said firmly. "It's made us stronger, It's made me stronger, he nodded, squeezing my hand. Good, because I don't want to lose this you, us, whatever this is. Sophie's next visit brought a surprise. Over dinner, she announced she was moving to Charleston, just a few hours away. I want to be closer, she said, her eyes flicking between us. Not just for this, but for you both. Your home. Her words hit me hard. Home. That's what we'd built. Not just in our Savannah house, but in the space we'd created together. I looked at Daniel, saw the same realization in his eyes. You're always welcome, I said, my voice steady. The months that followed were a delicate balance. Sophie visited more often, her presence a spark that kept us alive. We explored Savannah together, its riverfront, its hidden courtyards, each moment deepening our bond. Daniel and I found new ways to connect, our intimacy enriched by the openness Sophie had inspired. I took up painting, my canvases filling with Savannah's colours, a reflection of the vibrancy I felt inside. One night, as we lay in bed after Sophie's departure, Daniel turned to me. Claire, do you think this can last the three of us? I traced the lines of his face, the Savannah moonlight soft on his skin. I don't know, I admitted. But I know I'm not afraid to find out. Are you? He shook his head, pulling me close. Not as long as you're here. A year later, Sophie sent a letter from Charleston, inviting us to visit. Bring your Savannah magic, she wrote. Daniel and I packed a bag. The drive along the coast filled with quiet anticipation. In Charleston, we found Sophie in a small apartment, her energy unchanged. That night, we shared a bed again, the familiarity comforting, the newness exhilarating. But it was the mornings after the coffee, the laughter, the quiet moments that stayed with me. Back in Savannah, our home felt fuller, not just with memories, but with possibility. Claire, had found something rare, a marriage that could bend without breaking, a friendship that defied boundaries, a self I hadn't known existed. The Gothic revival house, with its arched windows and polished floors, was no longer just a home. It was a testament to what we'd built. Sometimes, the moment you feel most seen is the one you never expected. It wasn't about control or permission. It was about being invited in and realizing you were never on the outside. For me, it was enough to let it happen, to let it change me, and to know that with Daniel and Sophie, I'd found a home in the spaces between,